Hi, I'm Daniel Fisher. Today I'm really excited to show you this pedal, the X-Blender by Xotic X. Now, as you probably know, I'm mostly a keyboard player, but I really love experimenting with tones on guitars. And I found this pedal after doing a lot of research and a lot of playing around with different pedals, and this pedal consistently blew me away. And I bought one and I use it for my guitar a lot, but I also use it for my keyboard. So I thought I'd show you a bunch of different ways that it can be used. Because when you first look at it, it's like, what does this do? You know, and do I really need it? And hopefully I can show you that you really do need it. So first off, what is it? The idea was that they needed to get your pedals out of the loop. Some of your older pedals that are sucking tone, sucking volume, adding noise, but maybe that pedal does something you really like. And so what you can do is you send out of your guitar into this pedal, then you come out of the out, and when neither of these lights are lit, it's true bypass. So regardless of what's in this loop, it is not in your signal chain in any way, shape, or form. Then when you turn on the true bypass switch, and what you're doing now is you're letting that loop through, but like I said, it is true bypass when you turn it off. When you go to the blend function, you now have this huge knob that lets you blend from 100% of the effects chain to 100% dry guitar. And what that lets you do is blend dry signal back into your chain of effects, which is just a brilliant sound. Now, Xotic has a compressor called the SP, which has a blend knob on it, so you can actually blend between the compressed sound and dry sound, and I've always liked that sound. But there are so many other things you can do with this blend as well. First, I want to show you, though, just how good the pedal all by itself improves your guitar tone. So, I'm giving you the dry signal. This is a Gibson BFG with stock pickups, and it's going into a Fender Deluxe reverb amp. I have the amp set really clean, no distortion, no effects whatsoever, and with this in true bypass, it's effectively out of the chain. But even with just the dry signal, listen to what this thing does to your sound. And initially, a lot of these things are hard to hear until I turn them off and you miss what's been added. So I'm just going to play chords a couple times. And take it out. I mean, they're both great sounds, but the clarity. And that's with no bass treble controls, nothing's being added. It's just the pedal kind of as a clean boost, just makes it sound amazing. So the first pedal I'm going to put in the chain and the loop is the Xotic SL Drive. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm taking a send from the Xotic blender, going into the drive, out of the drive, back to the pedal. And with this off on the true bypass side, basically nothing's changed. And then as I turn this on, now get that nice Marshall kind of sound. But I can now, if I turn this blender on, I can go from that and I can start bringing dry signal in. So here's fully dry, and then here's a blend of that. So I'm getting my original pick attack as well as the distortion and the compression that comes along with the distortion. And then I take the blend back off. Now, you'll notice that there's a volume difference because when I'm using mostly dry in the blend setting, it's not going to be as loud as the distortion by itself. So that's where these makeup gains come. So I just sit and turn the volume. So now I can go between pure distortion and the blend. Now they also give you two really powerful tone controls, treble and bass. So here's boosting up some of the treble. cutting. And then the bass. So clearly a lot of power there. There's also a 6 dB boost switch, which really just helps overload the front end. Again, true bypass. Effect only. And a blend of wet and dry. And you're really getting that pick attack. So an interesting thing is a lot of pedals, especially some older designs on compressors and some older wahs and things, they invert the phase of the signal. It's really not a big deal when you're doing series effects where one's plugged into the other all the way to the end of the chain. But if you start doing effects in parallel, all of a sudden phase becomes very important because things are going to start canceling each other out if the phase is inverted compared to the dry signal. So one really cool thing that makes the X-Blender useful is that it has an effects phase switch. It basically takes the effects chain and inverts it 180 degrees. And it really doesn't matter how many pedals you have in there, they're going to be one of the two phases eventually when you add them all up. And then my advice is just try the switch in both positions and see which one you like, because there's actually a lot of very cool things you can do with phase. So for example, here it is in phase, and I'm going to blend the two signals 50-50. And now I'm going to throw it out of phase, and what's going to happen is it's going to be the difference between the two signals. In other words, the one's going to be subtracted from the other. So only things that are different are going to be hearable. And as you change the wet-dry ratio, you're kind of changing the frequencies that are canceled and how they're canceled because of the amplitude of the two signals out of phase. So here it is. And so it's just a very interesting tone manipulation tool. In fact, I can even take the entire pedal out of the signal. And I came up with this one this morning. I keep coming up with more ideas to try on this thing. But if I just send a cable straight through, so now when I turn this on, it's just the regular clean boost. But as I start going to wet, I can now start using the bass and treble controls. And where it gets really interesting is if I throw it out of phase, now the tone controls are actually changing what's being cut because it's 180 degrees out of phase with the dry. So just some ideas for tonal experimentation. So now I'm going to try a different pedal. Okay, so now I have one of my favorite phase shifter pedals, the Moogerfooger 12-stage phaser. And I love everything about it, except I've always wished it had a mix knob. It's the only Moogerfooger pedal that doesn't have a mix knob that blends wet and dry. So I was really excited to try it with this because sometimes like you want that phase effect, but you don't necessarily want it 100%. So dry signal. 100% of the phase shifter. Again, great sound, but now I put the blender on. take the edge off a little bit. I still have some of the motion of the phase, but it's not completely immersed in phase. And you'll notice that there's a really large knob for the wet dry. The reason is so that you can reach down with your foot and easily control the wet dry on your own. So now let's try another pedal. All right, so now I have a compressor. As I mentioned before, the Xotic SP already has a blend knob. So I grabbed, this is the Warden by Earthquaker Devices, and I've got it set kind of grabbier than I would normally use it, but I'm kind of setting it that way to show an example of the difference between the dry and the wet. So dry again, and then with the compressor on, and you can hear like I'm really grabbing at the attacks, but the benefit of that, of course, is that I get a nice long bloom at the end. By turning on the blend, I can take the dry, which has a nicer realistic attack, and start blending that bloom back into it. Now I'm going to lose some amplitude by having mostly dry. And also I'm noticing that I had a little phase issue as I went through center, so this one might be inverted. Again, it's always just whatever sounds better, so I'm going to throw that just to prove it. And you can hear I don't have that weird dead spot. So this does sound better in the inverted position. But now, at a 50-50 mix, you're hearing the initial real pick attack. But then I'm also getting the nice bloom. So it's kind of a best of both worlds. You're getting the thing that you like about compressors without the thing that you hate that compressors do. All right, so now I have an Electro-Harmonix RTG, which stands for Random Tone Generator. It's basically a box that makes boops and bleeps. But sometimes that's the right thing to have, and it's kind of a fun thing to throw in randomly. But if you're a guitar player, the first thing you'll notice when you turn this pedal to the side is that there's no input. Because this is just an oscillator creating sound. It has nothing to do with a guitar going into it. Which means that if you wanted this to go through your rig, you'd have to come up with some sort of mixer and get that all set up. Then you got to power supply the mixer. What this will do is allow you to just bring in a nice mix of both. So if I turn the blender on, I can have guitar. But if I really want to take advantage of it sounding like it's part of the system, I can add more effects after the fact. So now I have the SL drive on the output of the X-Blender, which means that the mix of these two things are going to get distorted. It'll kind of make them a little bit more related. And as I blend from one to the other, the distortion will kind of favor one over the other, which is kind of a neat sound. So I turn on the distortion, turn on the random generator, hit a chord. Just some other fun ideas you can do with this thing. And so I talked to people at Sweetwater and I said, what other ideas would you have for this thing? And someone said in the church market, they often need to go from a fairly dry verse to a much more ambient chorus. So they were saying this would be really nice to have a bunch of pedals set up for a very ambient sound, and then in real time be able to just dial quickly between a drier signal or a wetter signal. So now I'll set that up for you. All right, so now I've kind of reproduce that setting where I've got a very ambient set of effects. I've got my favorite chorus flange, the Moogerfooger Clusterflux, going into the Boss Reverb RV6. That's set to a very ambient reverb that also has some delay on it, and then that's going into the end of the chain. So I now have three choices. I have fully dry, I have the wet chain only, which, as you can hear, has a very strong chorus and a lot of reverb and echo as well. But if I press the blender button, now I can go from fully wet to completely dry and anything in between. So every time I play with it, I come up with another idea on how to use this thing. But clearly now you should have found several of these ideas that make this pedal indispensable to you. My name is Daniel Fisher. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any further questions, please contact your Sweetwater sales engineer.